In this video, I am going to show you how to mix colored pencils to make other colors using only one colored pencil set, which in my case happens to be Faber-Castell Polychromos. And additionally, I will also show you how to mix colors for some common fur colors as well as some plants. These color mixing tips are very useful to do if you are limited on colors with your colored pencil set, you do not have a color you need, or you are trying to match colors you are drawing from a reference. And be sure to stick around until the end for some bonus tips on blending colored pencils. Sometimes we just don't have a color we need, or maybe you're following a tutorial and don't have a color that's being used, or maybe you just want to learn some basics to mixing colors. So first, I'm going to show you some common color combinations and how to get them. I will be using only Faber-Castell colored pencils to achieve these colors. The first two colors that I'm going to mix are a couple of luminance grays, and these are the two gray colors I use in my drawing sometimes. I will be matching these two colors using my Faber-Castell colored pencils. I will also include links to all the colored pencils and supplies I've used in the video description. One thing to note when you are trying to mix and match colors is it is incredibly hard to get things to be 100% perfectly matched. I did my best to match these two colors of the Caran d'Ache Luminance and using my Faber-Castell, and although they aren't perfect, they are pretty dang close. The first color I will demonstrate is the Luminance Steel Gray. Then second, we're going to go over the Luminance Payne's Gray. So the first thing I'm doing is taking my Caran d'Ache Luminance Steel Gray, and I am just filling out a section of this on the paper so that we can have this to gauge on what to match to. So the color rows that I have up above are already pre-done mixing that I did before just to kind of test out these colors. And what we're doing down below is the actual mixing. I'm going to show you exactly how I mixed these colors up above. So the first color I'm going to take is the Cold Gray 2. And you want to put in a kind of medium layer with this Cold Gray 2. Not a super light layer, but a little bit more than light. Then you're going to take Cold Gray 4. And you're going to add a light layer of that over the top. Then you're going to take light ultramarine and add a very light layer of this over the top as well. Try to get the color as even as possible. Don't create a bunch of streaks with this. Now you're going to take cobalt green and add a thin layer of this over the top. You don't want to add too much of this cobalt green because that could totally throw everything off. Now we're going to go back with that Cold Gray 2, and what we're going to do is burnish blend this out so that it gets to be a smooth color transition. And there we have that steel gray blended out, and it's never going to look exactly perfect like the colored pencil itself of the Caran d'Ache, because not only is the Caran d'Ache wax-based and Faber-Castells are oil-based, but the colored pencil of the Caran d'Ache pencil is already mixed all these pigments together to create that color. And when you're mixing other colors to create a similar color, and it's not just one colored pencil, you don't have that manufacturing of all the colors being professionally blended together during the creation of the colored pencil itself. So it's going to be a little bit more of a grainy look, but that's okay. When you're doing your colored pencil drawings, you can either blend it using odorless mineral spirits, or you could even go through and burnish blend better than I did. Now we're gonna do the Payne's Gray. So you wanna get a layer of this on the paper. If you happen to have the Caran d'Ache colored pencils, you can go ahead and do this. If you don't, then just watch on. So I want to get that color down so that I can match it with the other colors I'm going to be adding on. And as well with this one, what we're going to start out with is the Cold Gray 2 as the base. And we're going to add much the same as before, kind of a medium layer, not super light. Then you're going to take Cold Gray 4 again and add a layer of this over the top. Then it's going to be a layer of light ultramarine over that. With this one, you want to go just a little bit heavier with this light ultramarine because this Payne's Gray is a little bit darker than the Steel Gray. You just don't want to add too much though. Now you're going to take Def Blue. And with this Def Blue, less is more. Don't add too much. You can add more later if you need to. So just try to go over it and make a light layer. Now you're going to take Cold Gray 2 and burnish blend this out. And you want to press fairly hard when you burnish blend so that it kind of presses all of those colors together. I'm also going to add in just another layer of that Def Blue, really faint, just to kind of darken it up and bring a little bit more of that purple in there. And that's close enough. Mixing colors isn't an exactness, it's about getting it as close as you can because, let's just face it, other colors from other sets, it's kind of hard to mimic those colors. It can be done, but it's never going to be 100% perfect. Now I will demonstrate color mixing with the different fur types and trying to match up to the reference photos that you're going to see. These will be some warm and cool shades of gray, animal fur, and a couple leaves, as I do believe those are some of the hardest colors to get accurate. So hopefully this video will help you out a bit if you find yourself struggling in these areas with these types of fur and matching your colors. We're going to first start off with light gray, and you're going to want to take your warm gray 2. If you're using the Faber-Castell 60 set, that is the set that I am using for this. So the first thing you're going to do is pick off the reference photo, identify what color it is that's in the lightest areas. And you're going to start trying to get that down as your first layer and blend that out. So don't worry about trying to get the fur details. This is just the color mixing aspect of matching colors to reference photos. Now you're going to take cream and add a layer of this into it. If you look at that reference photo, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a yellow color to it, and that's what this cream is going to add. Now, if you were mixing the darker areas of this reference photo, just so you know, it is a cat, but the darker areas also have this cream color in there too. The only difference is that the darker areas have some brown over the top. So you're going to take Van Dyke Brown and lightly go over the layers you've already got down. Less is more. You don't want to add too much right off the bat. Now you're going to want to take your warm gray 2 and burnish blend some of this out. Lighter colored furs are particularly kind of hard, and depending on what animal you're drawing, the different colors in the light fur kind of vary. So with this cat, it's a little easier because it's really kind of just your warm gray 2 and a cream and a little bit of a brown. Whereas some of those other light fur colors can actually have a hint of blue and green in them, and is really kind of hard to match exactly what to use with those. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a matchup for kind of a darker gray color. This type of fur kind of varies. There's some areas that are lighter and then some that are darker. And I'm just going to kind of work in an area that's a little bit more on the dark side. So for this one, you want to start off with warm gray 5. This is the darker warm gray. If you don't have the Faber-Castell set, you're going to want to just use a darker kind of warm toned gray from your set. So what this is the first layer that's going down of this color matching. and you want to identify the lightest hairs in the section that you're going to be working in, and that's the layer you want to get down. You want to match to that color, because then when you add the other hair strokes over it, you're going to go darker. So your goal with your drawings is to try and match the lightest base layer for areas that you're working on. Now you're going to take warm gray 2 and add a layer of this over the top. Then back with that warm gray 5. And even with this, I'm kind of doing just a little bit of a pattern in there, but not really going for details of the fur. So it's kind of like a blurred version of the fur. Now you're going to take Def Blue and add a little bit of this in there, because it's kind of hard to see in the reference photo right at this moment, but if you saw before when I showed the reference photo, you'll see that there's kind of a little bit of a purple hue to this fur. And usually there is. With black or dark gray furs, they aren't just plain straight gray or plain straight black. They have colors in them. So you're going to want to add either your purples, blues, sometimes yellows, and even reds. Now you're going to take a black colored pencil and start adding a little bit more of those darker values. One thing to note when you're doing dark fur is that if you don't use colors for it, it's not going to look so realistic. So think of when you take a photo and you completely turn it to black and white. What that does is it strips all of the colors out of it and turns it into just values. And if you do your whole drawing like that with colored pencils, it's going to end up looking like kind of more of a graphite drawing where you just use pencil instead of actual colors. So you definitely want to use colors when you're doing your blacks or your gray animals so that it looks more lifelike. Now you're going to want to take another layer on top with that Def Blue. And then go over this with warm gray 2, just to kind of burnish, blend a little bit of those areas and lighten up some of the areas that are a little bit lighter in the reference photo. Then you're going to take warm gray 5 again and just add in a little bit of those fur details kind of on the edge. So that one's done. Now we're going to move on to the brown fur. And this is really not like a straight brown. It's kind of more of an orangey red brown, but it's still like a version of brown. So what we're going to start off with is burnt ochre. And what you want to do is identify, as with the other reference photos and with any reference photo that you do, identify the lightest areas of your reference photo. Try to match those colors and get that down as your base layer, because if you get your base layer right, it's going to help you out in the end, because you really can't go over darks with light colored pencils. They just don't show up the same. So now you're going to take sanguine. I think that's how you say it. It's kind of a muted out reddish orange color. You're going to add a layer of this over the top. And don't go too heavy. Less is more. If you need more later, you can always darken it up. You want to add your layers in slow increments. Now you're going to take that burnt ochre again. Now you're going to take walnut brown and create some shadows. As you create this, you want to try and draw them in the direction of the fur growth. Don't just draw your strokes in a willy-nilly way, every which way. So now you're going to add a little bit more of a red color into this. You're going to take a middle cadmium red and add a layer of this over the top. Now, if you're wondering why these are all grainy, that's because I'm using medium drawing paper. This paper has a little bit more of a toothy texture to it, so it's going to allow you to get more layers onto your work. I happen to use this paper a lot because it allows more give and take if you're kind of making mistakes and learning what to do. So I'm going to blend these out later using odorless mineral spirits, and it won't be so white and grainy. So now I'm taking my odorless mineral spirits with a number 3 brown brush and blending out this brown. And then I'm going to go through and blend out the dark gray. So what you could do with yours is once your odorless mineral spirits dries on your paper, you could go over and add in a little bit more of that walnut brown just to kind of darken it up if you wanted to. After all, this is just kind of a practice to help you with matching colors on some of the more difficult colors to work with and match from your reference photos. All right, so now we're gonna move on to the leaf color matching for this tutorial slash tips video. And this is the reference photo that I will be using. Drawing greens can kind of be a little tricky. It depends on what you're drawing exactly, but usually in order to get the kind of green that you need in your wildlife or landscape art, you're gonna have to end up mixing at least 3 or more greens just to try and get those colors really accurate. So the first color you're gonna start off with is earth green yellowish. And this is like the lightest kind of yellow-green color of the Faber-Castell 60 set. You're gonna start off by adding a layer of this across the entire area of the leaf. Then you're going to use cadmium yellow lemon to go over the top of that, just to kind of add it a little bit of a more neon yellow color to it. So this yellow color is, of course, on a spectrum of more of a bright yellow than it is a blue spectrum of the earth green that is already down. And when adding this color in, you just want to go light. You don't want to add too much at this point because you definitely don't want this leaf to be too yellowy. Then you're going to take pine green and add a layer of that over the top and focus this pine green in the areas that are darker from the reference photo. These are going to be kind of these shadows. So the reason why it's got a really light area and a dark area is because the light is shining from behind the leaf and illuminating it. So this portion of the leaf doesn't have any light coming through with it, so it's darker. When you're making your strokes and doing leaves, you want to make sure you always go with the direction of the leaf. You don't want to go against it because that's not going to help it look realistic. Then you're going to blend this out, and I am using Mona Lisa Odorless Mineral Spirits with a number 8 watercolor brush to blend this out. Once you blend it out with Odorless Mineral Spirits, you want to wait at least 15 minutes for it to dry before you add any other layers over the top of it. If you aren't using odorless mineral spirits, you can go ahead and just skip this step and go straight into the next portion, which is to start adding more colors over the top of it. As you begin to add more colors over the top of your drawing, it will kind of burnish blend it together. Although I would recommend between this and the next step is to add another layer of that greenish yellowish and another layer of the pine green. Now what I'm doing is drawing in another leaf in this section, not just one leaf, but 2 leaves. So we're starting off with that earth green yellowish to begin with. As we did before with the previous leaf, get a good layer of this in. And then start adding in some of that lemon green. So with this leaf, it actually has a portion of the leaf that is kind of catching light in an overcast setting. So this kind of creates a little bit of a waxy look to the leaves. And in order to get this waxy look, you're going to want to use some blues and grays. So I'm starting off by using a light ultramarine. Then take pine green and go over the top of that. Then you're going to take cool gray 2 And of course, I'm going to take my number 8 round brush with my odorless mineral spirits and blend this out. If you aren't using odorless mineral spirits, you can go ahead and just skip the step to the next part. Finishing off the first leaf. So to start off with this one, we're going to use chromium green opaque. So this is a little bit of a yellowy green compared to the pine green. So the pine green has a little bit more of a blue color to it, whereas this has a little bit more yellow. Then coming back in with that lemon yellow, lemon or lime. Then using that chromium green opaque again. And I'm going to blend this layer out with my odorless mineral spirits using a number 3 brush instead of the 8 because I don't need a wider area to work with. So now what I'm doing is working on that second leaf, and I'm taking my white colored pencil from my Faber-Castell set, and I'm going to go over the top, and this is also going to kind of burnish, blend the colors underneath together and make it a little smoother. And this is going to give that leaf the kind of waxy look that it has in the reference photo. Then I'm going to take light ultramarine over the top of that and add a little bit more of a blue color there. Then you're going to take pine green and go over the top of this very, very lightly. Try not to make any obvious pencil strokes. Then over the top of that, go over it with white again to kind of burnish blend this out and recreate some of the highlights there for that waxy finish. Then you're going to take earth green yellowish and add that over the top as well, and then you're going to finish it off with that opaque green. And then I'm going to blend this out, of course, with my odorless mineral spirits. And that is kind of the sum of creating these 2 leaves. They're not exactly perfect, but they are just to showcase you kind of the color matching that goes on when you're mixing colors to try and get it to look like a reference photo, and how many colors it actually kind of takes in order to get it to look the way it is in a photo. Now on to my bonus tips, and that is for blending colored pencils and using solvent for that. This really is the most ideal way to blend your colored pencils. Not only is it going to allow you to add much more layers to your work and make color mixing easier, it allows you to end up with much more vibrant colors in your work. By starting out with a few layers of color down, you use a round paintbrush, dip it in solvent, wipe it off a bit on a paper towel, and then apply it to your drawing in the area you want to blend. Rotate the brush in side to side and circular motions to blend the colored pencil into the paper. This method of blending is also really great at getting rid of all the whites of the paper if you're using more textured paper to draw on as opposed to smooth surface paper. Then the next step is you will allow that blended section you just did at least 15 minutes to dry before adding any more layers on top of it. And this is because you don't want to add any layers on top while it is still wet, because you could end up damaging your paper. Once it is dry, you can add more layers on top of it, and it goes on as if there wasn't even a layer underneath. Over time it will accumulate more colored pencil, of course, and eventually won't take any more layers, but it definitely increases the amount you can apply to your paper. You can learn more about blending colored pencils using solvent from a couple videos I've done in the past. They are some of my older videos, but still useful information. The links to those will be in the video description. Want to learn some drawing tips? You might be interested in watching the top right video, or alternatively the video YouTube suggests for you in the bottom right. And if you're interested in learning how to draw wildlife and pets, over on my Patreon I offer real-time 1 to 15 hour drawing tutorials with a voiceover of tips and explanations. Signing up gives you instant access to a growing library of real-time drawing tutorials, new tutorials every month, and other rewards. Sign up at patreon.com/JessicaMatheny or follow the link in the video description. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.